no, there's something totally going on. Or actually, a few weeks ago, and you'll hear it on a few of our episodes, um, I had a little bit of allergic reaction and a little bit of my throat closed up, and I ended up having a
Oh,
cough for like a week. And my voice was just like grainy because my throat was being used nonstop all day. I never had a chance to rest. And I remember having a conversation with one of my friends, and she was like, "It sounds like you're mad at me. Like,
ah,
what did I do? This doesn't sound like you." And I'm like, "It's not you. I've just been using my voice all day, and now this is the sound of my voice. I have nothing I can do about it." But it's important to recognize that sometimes. So for you, as you've grown throughout your career and worked with different individuals who, perceive information differently, working in groups, might be in high pressure situations, how have you tried to address connecting with those individuals, whether that's personally and professionally, and creating a high functioning value add relationship?
yeah, and I love the example that you just gave, how, an environmental situation sort of changed how you are interacting with others, and then how they perceived that about you. Even though it was wrong, they had a certain opinion of what was happening. When I did the psychometric initially, I learned some things about myself, some things that I didn't know. So, for example, I'm an introvert. Um, what that means is when I'm interacting with people, I don't show up. I'm not warm and fuzzy. I have a tendency to be a little more quiet and reserved, especially when meeting new people. I don't get energy in, big social situations. I get energy from being able to think about big problems and big opportunities, right? That energizes. So when I realized that about me, and that's just one dimension that gets measured. When I realized that about myself, I realized, hey, when I show up and I'm really focused on whatever we're talking about, I'm very often not engaging with people on a humanistic level or an energetic level because I'm so focused on what we're working on. Well, others, especially who are more extroverted, perceive that as being aloof or arrogant or disconnected or disinterested. And that's not the perception that I want them to have. So it's incumbent on me to say, I know that I can be very serious and focused, and that's not really good for relationship development for others. And so if the first thing I have to do is understand, who am I talking to? Oh, I'm talking to an extrovert. I need to get out of the weeds and get focused on the connection. And so I modify my own behavior to be a little bit more like them. One of the techniques that we teach, Olivia, to help people sort of operationalize this behavior modification is a tactic called mirroring. Mirroring is where you take on the attributes of the person that you're talking to, their pace of speech. Introverts have a tendency to be very sort of quiet and still in their body, so you can see introversion. You can also see extroversion. Extroverts have a tendency to talk with their hands and their arms, and they're very expressive in their face, and there's a lot of modulation in their voice. Well, when you identify those kinds of things and then you mirror them, then your body is going to tell you who you're talking to and how you should engage with them. And so it's a really simple technique to sort of help you connect with others much more quickly and deeply at the same time.
And I love that and how it can help and a habit you can put in place realistically without having to understand every different aspect someone's going through. Just take the second to look at how they're acting and trying to match it. Because once you try to do that, it makes someone, like you said, more comfortable. It makes them open up. But sometimes too, we all, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, depending on who you're with and how comfortable, you might end up changing, to that other side. I've been in situations where I I am an extrovert. I like to talk. Probably beneficial for hosting a podcast, right? Um, but I like to have those deep conversations and make connections with people. But sometimes if I go to an event, especially if I'm by myself, especially when I was starting out my career, or I go to an environment where I don't know anyone, I tend to become a little bit more introvert. I
Mhm.
walk in, I observe what's going on in my environment, I observe the people I'm talking to, and then I tend to open up some, or I gauge who to have the conversations with. But to some extent, that ends up being a little bit of mirroring, and then I go from, in that situation, an introvert to mirroring to, "Okay, now I've gotten really comfortable with you because I'm talking to you on a level we're both comfortable with. Now I'm gonna become more peppy, talk with my hands, become more of my extrovert self." Whereas certain situations where I do walk into an environment and I'm comfortable in this setting I'm in, whether that's a certain restaurant or, a certain activity like going golfing. Right off the bat, I could go to any golf course and I'm, an extrovert because I'm in an environment I'm comfortable with. So
Mhm.
it's just as important to realize that sometimes we can switch. Now, and that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you either. Sometimes we just need to adapt to our environments.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting and good insight. One of the ways to demonstrate what you just described there, that adaptability, is to understand, if you're right-handed, as an example, and I ask you to take out and sign your name, and you do it with your right hand, and you do it without even thinking about it. It's comfortable, it's relaxed, it's very normal. And then I ask you to take the pen and put it in your left hand and sign your name. It's not that you can't do it, right? That's the big takeaway. It's not that you can't do it with your opposite hand. It's that you have to pause, you have to think about it. It feels like more work, it feels awkward, it feels out of place. Exactly what you just described about that adaptation, that's exactly what the modeling looks like. For me to go, sort of show up more extroverted, I have to think about it. I have to do it consciously. I have to pay attention to what I'm doing. It feels like work, but I still do have the ability to exercise that when that's what my audience needs, or what, the group that I'm talking to, or the individual that I'm talking to. And again, it's under the auspices of connecting and building relationships. And when you do that, you said one other thing here that I think is absolute gold. You like to connect with people, and then you like to go deep with them. That connection piece is everything, right? And so if you're not able to connect and relate, then you're already on an uphill climb. And I want to tie this all the way back to your conversation about, or your question about propelling into the C-suite. For me, it sort of all begins with the ability to connect with others. And when you understand that you can adapt to different styles, which then allow you to develop those deeper connections, then the performance angle of the relationship is accelerated. Does that concept make sense?
Of course, and I want to take it a step farther with you. You just circled it back to the C-suite. So once you got yourself to the C-suite with that different perspective, with putting in the work, not just in your role, but taking the steps to advance your career with your education, with learning different knowledge bases. How did you, once in the role, kind of make it your own and say, okay, how do I make everyone comfortable? How I bring a different perspective, a different journey to the table. How do I utilize that to maybe bring that different perspective to conversations that might have not been happening before?
I love this question for a whole bunch of reasons, Olivia. The first thing that I want to address is, you said, how do I make people comfortable? Making people comfortable is not my goal. It's not my goal. Oftentimes, success requires a tremendous amount of discomfort. And it's not that we want to sort of, drive people to be uncomfortable, but we absolutely want to drive people into situations that are going to be uncomfortable, that help them then grow. And so my goal is not to make people comfortable. My goal is to set a, 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 a future state, a vision of what could be. Then I check back with my audience to say, is that desirable for you? Is that a destination that you'd like to go to? Is that the environment that you'd like to live and work in? And when we get the sense that that's what people want, then we start putting the pieces in place, building the bridge. It's the inspiration for the company name iBridge. Building that bridge to that future state, that destination that you want to be at, understanding that it's probably not going to be comfortable. It's going to be work, but when you get there, the benefits are going to be pretty fantastic.
And I love that, and I think it's so important to also, check in, like you said, the aspect of checking in and going, okay, is this where you're trying to go? And is this the goal? Because sometimes what we perceive as the goal or the marks along the way is not always what others perceive it. For you, how have you kind of taken this, your life experiences and applied that to your company, iBridge, and what you provide to different organizations?
Gosh, another fantastic question. When and I think you'll see the tie back to what we've been talking about. When I'm talking to a prospective new client, whether it's an individual that we're coaching, or whether it's an organization or a team, the very first thing that I want to know is, what problem are you trying to solve? Um, I'm interested in making a difference with my clients individually, or at a corporate or a team level. If I don't think that I have the ability, if I don't have the tool set, if I don't have the approach, if I don't have the solution, then I'm very likely going to disengage from that opportunity, which is kind of rare for companies, right? They want the revenue, but for me, if I don't have an opportunity to move an organization forward, then I'm not interested. And so I think that focal point of understanding what problem are you trying to solve, and then understanding, do I have the capacity to solve the problem? That's normally how we move forward. And then we engage in that. We then move in and say, is this the destination that you want to go to? And then we insert the workshops or the coaching or whatever to help them get there. And then the real work is, how do we help people solve the problems that are naturally going to come up along that journey? That's where the value is. Because oftentimes I think about the whole self-help category. That's a great model. It's a great perspective. It's a great tool set, but how does it apply to me? How does it help me solve my problems? And most self-help books, for example, don't necessarily go there because they don't understand you as an individual, your personality type, the problems that you're trying to solve. That's the space where my organization goes deep. It's like, how do we remove those impediments so you can actually get to that destination?
And when you work with organizations, big or small, what is your personal end goal when you see them implementing, whether it's in workshops or conversations you're having, the tools that you've provided through iBridge?
My personal goal is to make a difference. Um, I think the way that I would frame it is, because in the sales process, we call it discovery, which is where we're understanding what the problem is. My goal is to solve the problem. That's my top goal. My sort of mid-range goal is to improve where they are currently, and that's generally because there's no magic pill, right? There's no antidote that you can inject and all of a sudden the problem is solved and it never comes back. That's generally not how it works. So we're looking for incremental improvement towards that destination on a regular, ongoing basis.
And I think you mentioned a few really important takeaways here of key information. One, you can have different levels of goals, right? So you said your top tier, your middle range, you know, the other part here is really making that impact and understanding that even though you go to solve a problem, like you said, Jeff, it's also the fact that there are some inherent issues that there is no magic pill for. And you have to understand that you can perform no matter the situation or you're implementing something at 100%, but something is inherently going to come up. It isn't a one time, as we'll go back to your analogy, take the pill, solve the problem, and some of these minuscule activities or nuances will never populate again. We have to be prepared that, okay, yes, they're going to come up. When are they likely going to come up? And how can we then either pivot or solve that problem and keep moving? And it's so important to continuously have that process or idea of how to do that. So when they come up, it's not a crisis. It's okay, I've already seen this. This is what I have to do and keep pushing. For you, I want to talk about one other thing. Um, through your experiences and your unique expansion of your career and starting businesses, what would you tell the individual who might not feel like they are at the same level everyone else is, whether that's not being able to go to college when everyone else is going to college and deciding to go back later, or having that experience, but then as we grow professionally, people are growing, they feel like maybe ahead of them or accelerating at a different rate. What would your advice be to those individuals to keep going?
I think that the thing that's coming up for me right now is to de-emphasize your calculus on how you compare to others. I think that there's some inherent value in doing a comparison because it's how we know where we are. But from my perspective, that has to be the extent of it. I think the mistake that people make, and I hear this with my clients a lot, is, I'm here, but so and so is here, and this person that I came in before that this person, but that person is already above me. My advice is acknowledge that that's happening, acknowledge that that makes you feel bad, because those things are true. But you have to pivot off of that as your focal point and immediately move into how do I improve my situation? And very likely it's going to come through understanding how you can increase or improve the value that you provide to the organization. There are always two things, a minimum of two things at play here, Olivia. One is, are you adding the value to the organization? And number two is, are you developing relationships with the right people in the organization? One of the things that introverts often struggle with is the internal networking that's required for you to have the alliances in place for your career to flourish. Another sort of related concept to your question is this idea of, as I said before, I came from a working class family. Well, the mantra is work hard and your career will take care of itself. That is absolutely not true. It is 100% not true. We can look around and see people who are working really hard and not getting anywhere. Why? Because it requires more than hard work. It requires the relationship development with the people who are going to have an influence or a vote about your career behind the closed door when you're not in the room. Those are the people that you have to have relationships with. I want to insert a reference here that your audience can take a look at. There's a woman by the name of Carla Harris. Carla Harris was an assistant vice, or sorry, not an assistant. She was the vice chairman of one of the big houses on Wall Street, a huge investment firm. And she did a keynote with LinkedIn in their Talent Connect conference in 2018. It's a 30-minute segment. You can find it on YouTube. It's a 30-minute segment where she talks specifically about um, who's voting for you when you're not in the room, who's influencing your career when you're not in the room. And one of the things that we do at iBridged is we look at your organizational structure and we literally map out who those people are who are going to be able to influence things like promotions or scope expansions of your work, the things that are actually going to propel your career. And we build a strategy to connect and communicate and develop relationships with those individuals. Very often, they are the peer group of your manager or your manager's manager. And the mistake that most people make is they don't put the work in to develop the relationships with those folks. They think that their hard work is going to do it for them. And again, it just doesn't.
And I think that's a great way to start to wrap up the show because building relationships is so important. And you never know. and I've discussed this in other episodes, how those are going to play into each other, whether it's now or down the road, right? You brought up, which is very factual, having a connection with someone, not just based on your work, but being able to connect with them on different levels will
Yeah.
keep you at the forefront of their mind.
Yeah.
I very frequently have conversations about the importance of reaching out to individuals, not just to, hey, did you see what I'm doing or this or that, but to check in those holiday Thanksgiving text messages, those whatever it might be. And they don't necessarily have to respond to you, but there two things will end up happening. One, you're gonna stay in the forefront of their mind because you've now populated a message that has opened on their screen. Whether, they respond or not, they know, A, they're thinking of you, and then when something comes up, they'll go, "Oh, Olivia does that," or, "Oh, Jeff does that," and
Yeah.
now there's the connect. But it also ends up making sure people understand that you're there to support, whether that is just a very again, you have to identify what type of relationship you are having with individuals. There's people I check in with. It's a very respectful work environment conversations. Then I have my friends who, okay, tell me about life. What's going on more in your personal life? And we get more personal than I am with my work colleagues. But at the same level, I've become in all of my working environments, I've built relationships with my manager's manager, their manager, and when people are like, "Why are you putting in the time?" I go, "Because I might even get to a point where I am an equal to them, hopefully some point down the line, or in a different environment, and I should feel comfortable enough to hold a conversation with them." So I think that's really important that you brought up is like the growth, and you're a pure example of it. Growth does not all come in a one size fit all environment.
Mhm.
So keep that in mind as you continue to grow, that the relationships you're building today, you don't know how they're going to affect you down the line in a positive or negative way. So always keep it in the best of your ability to a positive interaction. Be that person where they know, yeah, I can count on them. They'll answer the phone. They're going to check in and see how things are going. And when you build that, you're going to be on the more forefront of people's mind. They're going to want to interact with you, and other opportunities are going to open up along that line as well. Jeff, how can people get in touch with you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, my direct email is Jeff, Jeff, at iBridged. So it's the word bridge with the letter I and the letter D on the front and the back end.com. And my response cycle, my goal is 24 hours. So if you send me an email, I'm going to get back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff, for all of your insight today. A few of our key takeaways from today's conversation is sometimes knowing someone has a leg up can actually end up being motivation for you. And you just have to recognize that yes, they might have the leg up, what how that makes you feel, but then motivate yourself to keep pushing forward and not dwell on that fact, as well as continue to ask yourself, how do you add value to an environment, whether that's your personal life or your professional life? In any situation, how are you adding value? And is there a conversation you can be having with someone else where you can get new insight, get new value, and be prepared for different situations? As well as one of my favorites that Jeff had mentioned, mirroring can be beneficial in making people comfortable. When you mirror someone else's body language, you inherently match whether they're an introvert or an extrovert, how they might be doing in that environment. But then over time, not only have you become available to shift in your own situations, depending on the people you're talking about. But those people can end up going from an introvert because they don't know the situation or how to feel to an extrovert because they've become comfortable. So you never know, but making someone feel comfortable will end up, whether that's in your personal or professional life, making someone the most match to you and getting the most value out of each other's relationships as well as ask yourself what the problem is and what you specifically can be doing to solve that problem. Sometimes we all just look at a problem and think it's too daunting or I can't do that. But it might be as simple as taking a piece of the puzzle and knowing you can actually solve that piece and bringing others in to solve the other pieces is just as important as knowing whether you can actually do a full job. And like Jeff said, sometimes it does take saying, hold up, I cannot actually do that and add value. And my favorite as well, one of my top favorites was who's voting for you when you're not around? Because whether that is in your personal life or your professional life, understanding who has your back, who's going to advocate for you when you're not in the room, who is going to boost you up even when you're down is really important, whether that's in your professional life or your personal environment, because you only want to surround yourself with people that you know are really going to build you up and so that you can also make a positive impact not just on what you're doing today but long term and make that impact on people that you might not even be interacting with today. So understand who's boosting you up in the rooms when you're not around and what you can be doing to boost others up when they're not in the room. This was a great episode with our top notch guest, Jeff Harnois. Thank you for listening and have a successful day. Awesome. Well, thank you, Jeff.
Olivia, that was fantastic.